When you're watching Back to the Future Part 2, I mean, in terms of sequels, you know what I mean? This is like a this is a terrific science fiction sequel like when A New Hope went to Empire Strikes Back, you know what I mean? It amplified it. It went above and beyond. It had all this chaos and drama, and it just amplified the idea of time travel to a higher degree, right? So if the first movie was just the beginning, right? It just showed us that, like, oh, this is what time travel is. This is how they time travel. This is what happens when you go back in time and you mess with things, right? Like you use it to your advantage. You know what I mean? It's how you reverse time, how you fix things, how you change certain stuff, right? Like it's really interesting. It's really cool, you know, and that movie alone by itself is a great movie, you know? But this one just took that concept and just kept on, you know, another level up, right? It just took it to a new dynamic. And I genuinely, you know, I think that they did such a great job weaving it back and forth together and making everything fit, you know what I'm saying? So essentially, it just kind of picks up where we left off. You know what I mean? They go to the future now, and now things are completely different. Things are, you know, obviously futuristic. There's sort of a sense of wonder from Marty about, like, oh, let me go see, let me look around, let me figure some stuff out, let me learn about the future, let me learn about my future. Let's see what happens, you know, down the line. And I really enjoyed that. I think, you know, I have to say, they really, the woman who plays Jennifer in all of the movies, she kind of gets you know, she kind of gets sidelined a lot, right? But obviously, and this movie, she really got her chance to shine, you know? I think in the first movie, it was just kind of like, introduced a love interest, like, see Marty's life, you know what I mean? What he has for himself. And then looking to, you know, right now. But now she goes to the future with him, and she kind of, like, immediately gets knocked out. She gets put on the street, then she gets taken to her home, and, you know, it just kind of, it messes everything up, right? It does a thing. And then I kind of like the idea of, like, her meeting her old self and her old self meeting her young self. That was a hilarious moment. I thought that was cool. I thought it would have been interesting to see, like, the whole, you know, the idea of, like, the timeline kind of, like, everything just, like, breaking apart, like reality itself was like like a huge explosion or something, you know? But instead it's kind of like they just pass out from shock of seeing each other, you know, in their different stages. So I thought that was really fun. But then I guess in the third one she kind of gets pushed away again, right? She kind of gets left behind. So it's really, she really gets the bad end of the deal in all of these movies. You know, she always gets sidelined or pushed away or left to just fall asleep, right? And then wake up, you know. But anyways, in this movie, I think it's funny that they keep revisiting the old spots, but, you know, it works wonders. But I'm saying I really liked obviously they redo some of the same old things, but the actor who plays Biff, dude, that guy is fantastic. To constantly, time and time again, to come back and play different characters and to do it in a fun but realistic but similar way. It all just fits so well, you know. I thought he was definitely the actor who got to play around the most, because Doc stays Doc, you know, Marty stays Marty, right? But they're just in the future. Him, on the other hand, he changes constantly throughout the movies, you know what I mean? He constantly gets to play around and be different characters, you know what I mean? Obviously he's the he's like the bully, and then he gets to be, he plays a bully in basically everything, but it's kind of like fun to see the change up, right? He goes from the bully, then he becomes like a, he helps out the family. He's like a friend of the family, or like he works for the family or whatever, right? He's kind of like a, retreats back into himself. And then in this movie, we see him like really old and kind of like tired, but smart, and then we get to see him into this billionaire, right? Who's amassed a great fortune, you know what I mean? So he's become like this successful sleazebag, right? So it doesn't really, we see what he's like in every stage of his life, you know what I mean? We get to see that, like, this is who he is when he's all grown up, He's just like this, what do you call it? In the original timeline, or like from Marty's first timeline, he was kind of like this work buddy / bully who would like get George to do his work for him or whatever, right? And it was just kind of like, okay, so we've seen him with like a job. We've seen him work for the family. We've seen him as a billionaire, and he's still always a scumbag. I always wanted him to choose something good, find something better for himself, right? I didn't want him to be like this subservient person, right? I just wanted him to always choose something different for his life, find something that calls to him, you know what I mean? And I thought it would have been fun if he became like a race car driver, you know what I mean? Like, I thought that would have been funny. I thought that would have been a good calling, because he does love driving his car, but he just doesn't like losing. And because he's always kept losing and losing and losing over and over and over again, it's just that, like, I thought it would be cool, or like a fun idea if that happened for him. But anyways, in this movie, Marty goes to the future with Doc, and is essentially trying to save his kid's future, not so much his own. He's kept in the dark about it. And we see the skateboard scene done with the hoverboard. And the hoverboard was such a fascinating idea. It's such a cool and fun idea, I like it when they show like futuristic things, and then they make it like, I guess the best example is like in Star Wars, when they had that hovercraft that Luke's flying in or whatever, and it's like close to the ground, but they used mirrors to make it look like it was floating, or like above, you know what I mean? Like it was flying, but it wasn't actually. And in this movie, I don't know how they did the hoverboard sequences, but I did like it. I thought that it was a cool, clever use of like CGI or whatever the kind of technology that they used for whatever they did to trick the audience into thinking that he was actually hovering. Maybe it was just like green screen magic, or it was just like combination of wires and props, right? Like they worked everything together. I thought that was really neat. I enjoyed that quite a lot. And obviously there are huge consequences in this one, right? Like, so if the first movie was a success story, was him going back to the future, this one is going back to the future again, but the real future, a real way of going back to the future. So the way the timeline is described, or it's pointed out by Doc, is Biff stole the time machine in 2015, okay? He stole it there. Now he went back into the past and gave himself the sports almanac that Marty bought. And so back in 1955 is when he gave himself the sports almanac, okay? Now, and sometime later on, like 3 years later, he wins his first race, he starts gambling, he starts doing the thing, right? So, and that point in time was when certain events started playing out differently, okay? But in order to stop him from making that bet later on in the future, they have to, at this point in time, go back into the past in 1955 and stop him. Because if they go back into the past if they go back to 1985, it won't be the time that they know. It'll be this new timeline that Biff has created from 1955. So in order to fix 2015, 1985, they have to go back to 1985 because it's a whole new reality. It's a whole new future. So now they have to go back to 1955. And at this point, there are two time machines there, right? Doc and Marty are trying to get back to the future. And then Doc and Marty are trying to stop Biff with the sports almanac. It's a whole, you know what I mean? It's a whole thing. And we get to revisit some old moments. I think the guy who plays George McFly isn't in this movie, because the way that they shoot the what's it called? The way that they shoot it or they frame it, they don't show his face in the movie. So I was always, I'm sure I've read it, or maybe there's a reason why he didn't come back. Maybe he was working on something else, but I thought that it was pretty easy for me to tell that they didn't bring him back, and I was like, oh, that's disappointing. But or maybe they just reused old footage, and I'm out of my mind. But I thought it was really cool to see what's it called? Just to see like the same event take place from a different perspective. So when I go back and I watch the first movie, you can always poke fun and be like, oh, but future Marty is there too. And he's in the whole like disguise and the getup, and he's saving himself, And then this is where he gets locked in the, this is when he's looking for the sports almanac, but then he sees George punch Biff. And then this is when Biff and Marty fight again. And this is, you get to like poke fun at certain stuff that happens in the sequel, What else is there? I also thought that I really like the interactions between Marty and Biff in the new alternate future, where Biff is like, he's a corporate king, he owns everything, he's a billionaire, he can't lose. Although there have been some like paradoxes or like discrepancies with the timeline, because it's like, if, let's say, so from Marty's timeline, right, the original 1985 timeline, okay, things kind of play out regularly, okay, and then they go into the future of 2015 with Doc, right? Now, the sports almanac that Marty gets, all right, from 1950 to 2015 or whatever, right? This, or however, 1950 to 2000 or whatever, right? He gets that sports almanac, okay? That's from his timeline where nothing changes. But if Biff places a bet on one of the games, doesn't that effectively change everything, right? Like the game shouldn't turn out exactly the same anymore after he's made that first bet. Does that make sense? So like everything should theoretically change, right? Kind of like the butterfly effect, you know what I mean? Because if, let's say Biff never placed a bet on it, then everything sports-wise should stay the same. But because he does place a bet and he wins a lot of money and it like is a huge deal, then it's like, then nothing really should change, should it? I mean, everything should change from that moment, except it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, but, and then in the future, or like in part 3, there's another one, and it's like a whole thing. But anyways, long story short, essentially the idea was Biff. Oh yeah, Biff goes back in time and then he comes back to 2015 or whatever, right? And that's like a huge deal to people, because he shouldn't be able to go back to the original time, because then it would just be the future and he wouldn't be that old guy Biff anymore. He would be this billionaire Biff. So it just kind of is like weird, but we don't really see that part, I guess. Anyways, because he has to go to 2015 again to give Doc and Marty the time machine, so that way they can go back into the past and realize everything is now Biff, you know? But hey, whatever. You know, I get it. It's just a movie, but it's one of those things that people poke at, is that like he shouldn't be able to go back to 2015 where he was, you know? Everything should just naturally change. But yeah, what else is there? Oh, and also seeing Marty's future, or when Jennifer sees what happens to Marty, or like him getting fired, or his job, and like what he's doing, or what happened to his life. I thought that was really. I thought that was very. It had a good message behind it. You know, it was just that like you can't. You know what I mean? You can't let other people force you to do stupid stuff. You know what I mean? You can't worry about what people will say or what people will think of you. You know what I mean? You got to do things that you like, or the things that matter to you the most. And it's also like kind of like a go for it kind of a theme. You know what I mean? Time is very precious, and time is something that you should use to your benefit to go for the things that you really want. So Marty should have gone for music, but he had to settle for like a corporate job because he messed up his hand because somebody called him. He got into a big car accident and it became a whole deal, right? So it's like, how do you change things? You know, how do things go differently? And I like that Jennifer sees this, not Marty. You know, I like that. And Marty's kind of left in the dark of it because he has to figure it out for himself. He has to change. You know, he has to do it right now in order for the future to be different, you know? And then the thing about Doc is what I like about Doc and this whole thing is he's very active. You know, he really pushes the story forward, right? He brings everybody to the future. He, you know, kind of gives the go-ahead for Marty. He's the one who figures out to go back into the past. He's the one who's basically like really driving us there. You know, obviously Marty's the protagonist, or he's the one that's like doing a lot of heavy lifting to figure things out, but I really like Doc's involvement. I really like his, you know, how he does things, you know. I think him as a character is very iconic. He's very unique. And he's played brilliantly by the actor. I forget his name, darn it. And so when I watch this movie, I kind of, you know, I obviously like to think of what if I could go back in time to some of my moments and like just watch myself, you know what I mean? Or just kind of have like this deja vu moment, or be able to relive those experiences or those moments, you know what I mean? I thought that would be it would be so bizarre, but it'd also be kind of like nice, but it'd also be kind of infuriating because, you know, you make mistakes, you mess up, right? So it's just kind of like, how can you know, not see those parts of yourself, right? You just want to avoid them, you know what I mean? So ultimately, they go back into the past, right? They go back to 1985, but they need to figure out when exactly Biff got the book. So Marty has a chat with him. They talk to each other, and then Biff tries to kill Marty. He escapes in the time machine. They go back to 1955. They have to get the book back, and then it becomes that whole night getting it back. And then essentially Marty gets away. They go back to 1985. I mean, my bad. They burn the book. They burn the sports almanac. They go back to the future, 1985, and then sadly, you know what I mean? Lightning is there. It's in the sky, and it hits the DeLorean while Doc is in there, and he kind of gets sent way back into the past. And then out of nowhere, a guy comes with a letter saying that Doc wrote him a letter in 1885 telling him that he's alive and in the Old West, and now he kind of has to... Did I say 1985? My bad. They were in 1955. They burnt the sports almanac and they're about to go back to 1985. But because of the weather storm, because of the lightning, Doc is stuck up in the sky trying to land the DeLorean, and then he gets shocked back to 1885. And so he gets sent a letter from Doc saying that he's okay and he's a blacksmith now. And Marty's essentially like, "Oh my gosh, now I gotta go see him. I gotta go figure him out. I gotta go back to my time now. So how do I do it?" And Doc is essentially telling him that, like, you have to go find the other version. You have to find 1955 me, who just sent you back to the future, and talk with him. And now you'll be able to get back home. You know what I'm saying? So then we get the perfect ending with, we see Marty in the time machine. The lightning hits the clock tower. The DeLorean hits it and goes to the future. And then you see Doc celebrating. He's like, "Woohoo! Yeah, I did it. We did it. He went back to the future, back to the future, back to the future." And then here comes Marty running. Dun, 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 dun. And then he just comes up behind him. He's like, Doc. And then Doc is like, "Whoa, no, what are you doing here? Okay, I just sent you back to the future." He's like, I know, but I'm back. I'm back from the future. And then Doc hits us with the Great Scott. And then he passes out. Oh my gosh, I thought that was so funny. And that sets up the next movie. It's just one hell of a ride. You know what I mean? It's a crazy thing that they do with these movies. But they set it up so beautifully. They make it so interesting and fun and cool. I personally like the timeline, the way that they juggle the timeline. Obviously, there are some issues, right? There are obviously some sort of big changes that happen, but ultimately, I think that I do think that this is one of those great sci-fi sequels. You know what I mean? Kind of like in comparison. I mean, it's not Star Wars, in the sense of like I don't know, kind of like the franchise of it all, right? But I think in terms of kind of science fiction, it's a lot of fun. It's very cool, and I like how they revisited some good points and good memories. The school dance again, George punching Biff. They got to revisit. What else is there? We got to see Marty looking at himself, saving himself, right, from the bullies. We got to see... we got to see like an alternate future where Biff is married to his mom. George McFly is dead. We get to see kind of this life that Marty doesn't want. He sees the consequences of his actions. He sees how everything gets all messed up, right? So I'm genuinely impressed with the way that the story kind of holds up together. I thought it would have been interesting if, let's say, for instance, Doc wrote a letter to himself in prison or like in the mental institution, right? I kind of would have liked some sort of exchange between the one that got locked up and the one that's free. You know what I mean? Maybe that was a deleted scene, I don't know, but I thought that would have been interesting to see how they would have interacted. But obviously, for obvious reasons, they can't, speak face to face. That's why I thought the letter back and forth might be the best solution, but in a quick pace kind of a deal, it wouldn't work. Unless they did like walkie-talkie style or on the phone, in which case like, it might be funny if Marty calls Doc on the phone, right? And then Doc in the mental institution's like, I don't know who this is. I don't know what you're talking about. And the people watching him are like, oh, he's just crazy. Like, that's why he's locked up in the first place. Doc can't talk to himself, so he talks to Marty to talk to himself. Does that make sense? So Doc of the present talks to the past self him, and then they start talking. Or the alternate future him. Whatever. Doc's trying to talk to Doc through Marty because Doc can't talk to Doc one-on-one. Even on the phone, it could be, disastrous, as he might say. But you just see Doc like, it's like the game of telephone. He talks to Marty, Marty talks to Doc, Doc talks back to Marty, and they have like this conversation. I think that would be really funny. That might be really, really cool. What else is there? I want to say I think Back to the Future Part 2, it just really it really is the most dramatic because it has so much at risk, and it shows you that what corruption and greed and how even the slightest change messes everything up, Even the smallest thing out of place gets ruined. And it's really that sports almanac, the idea of like getting rich very quickly or, having that kind of power is like nobody should have that, So time travel is unnecessary, or time travel it's harmful and it messes everything up. So it's kind of like, on the one hand, it's cool to see humanity in the future, or like what happens earlier on. Later on in life, you want to see how the world turns out and how civilization carries on. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, how do you affect the world? No one person is like pointless. They have value. So you, me, anybody in the world goes into the future and they mess with things just a little bit, then, everything changes. The whole world becomes a new place. But it's all about just like appreciating things that happen, And then, yes, of course, trying to fix bad outcomes, but it's just, small change, Small change. And I think this movie is a great sequel. I think part 2 of Back to the Future is one of my favorite sequels. I remember I watched this movie back to back, I think, when they were playing it on TV or whatever. And, well, maybe not back to back. Maybe it was like every single night. I don't know what exactly it was. Maybe I I probably recorded it on my DVR or my, my thing or whatever. I had like I had like the thing that you could record it on from the TV. So yeah, I would watch it like back to back. And I think this is like one of those trilogies that like you want to watch back to back because they flow so well. They do very, very well in my opinion. In conclusion, when you're watching Back to the Future Part 2, I mean, get ready to go all over the place and to see the consequences of the time machine. See that it's all not just benefits and changing the world for the better. It also can change the world for the worst, if in the wrong hands. If the greediest person in the world could have it. So, yeah, it just makes me think, it makes me wonder about like, would I be like that? Could I really change that much? Like if future me came up to me and said like, here, this is how you can become a billionaire. I mean, obviously I would take it, but it's just like, I hope I don't lose myself. I hope I don't become corrupted or greedy about it. I hope I can maintain some humility and still be able to be me, be kind, unlike Biff. But yeah, anyways, Back to the Future Part 2, what a great sequel. Fun times, go back and explore Hill Valley, future of Hill Valley. Think about what could be and how you can change, and the future isn't all that it's. The future's only cool when you experience it, It's not something that's amazing or to be deeply appreciated when you just jump to it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys all next time. Thank you.